The Ladosian palace guards scattered in terror as Matthew burst from his enclosure, leading a seething swarm of feral human pets that had escaped captivity and now sought bloody vengeance against their alien masters. Just hours earlier, Matthew had been a captive himself, a human soldier trapped on an alien world, unable to communicate with his technologically superior captors. The Ladosians, mistaking him for a primitive beast, had placed him in a habitat to be kept as an exotic pet by Commander Zephyr and his wealthy Ladosian cohorts. Matthew seethed with humiliation and fury as he was gawked at, prodded, and treated like a dumb animal. His entrapment gave him a first-hand glimpse of the Ladosians' incredible anti-gravity vehicles, holographic interfaces, and towering megastructures that made Earth's mightiest cities look quaint. It became painfully clear that humanity was outmatched. From Jack, another captive human, Matthew learned a chilling truth. Hordes of humans had been abducted by the Ladosians to serve as pets for their debauched elite. These lucky humans faced a hellish existence trapped in filthy enclosures, subsisting on tasteless nutrient paste, lacking any mental stimulation. Many went mad. There were whispers of the unspeakable experiments carried out on humans in Ladosian labs. Zephyr's soiree pushed Matthew to his breaking point. Intoxicated Ladosian guests taunted and jabbed him with electroprods for sick amusement until he lashed out, severely wounding one of his tormentors. The incident earned Matthew an upgraded cell and a newfound classification as a potentially dangerous specimen to be studied and contained. As he paced his cell, the gravity of the situation crashed over Matthew. He was marooned on an alien world, treated as vermin, with no way to warn an oblivious Earth of the Ladosian threat. And now these conquerors had seen humanity's untamed ferocity firsthand. Matthew knew with grim certainty that unless he acted, the Ladosians would launch a strike against his vulnerable home world. But in that moment of despair, and spark of hope emerged. His outburst had revealed a critical flaw in his captor's arrogance. The Ladosians, for all their technological prowess, had severely underestimated human intelligence, willpower, and viciousness. It was a mistake Matthew vowed to make them regret. Matthew knew what he had to do, even if it killed him. He had to find a way to marshal his fellow humans, break out, commandeer Ladosian ships and weapons, and bring warning to Earth before it was too late. The road ahead was uncertain and perilous, but Matthew's purpose was now clear: ensure humanity's survival at any cost. Because if he failed, there would be no human race left to mourn him. Matthew paced the confines of his upgraded cell, his mind racing. The Ladosians had seen what he was capable of now. There would be no more underestimating the pet. He scanned every inch of his new enclosure, searching for any weakness to exploit. The energy barrier shimmered, unbreakable. The walls were smooth metal, unblemished except for the control panel the guards used to operate the cell. Matthew watched them day after day. He memorized the sequence of glowing glyphs they tapped into the panel. He counted the seconds between guard rotations, charting their movements. At night, he scratched the information into the underside of his sleeping platform with a bit of scavenged metal, hiding his work from the ever-present surveillance. As the guards changed shifts in the deep hours of the alien night, Matthew made his move. He palmed the makeshift tool he had painstakingly crafted from purloined meal trays, a long, thin piece of metal honed to a wicked point. In one fluid motion, he lunged to the barrier and stabbed the shiv through, wincing as the energy field seared his flesh. But the pain was inconsequential. All that mattered was the control panel and the precious seconds he had bought. Matthew input the stolen code and held his breath. The barrier snapped out of existence. He was moving before the guards even realized what had happened. A few quick taps and Jack's cell deactivated. Then the next, and the next. Bewildered humans stumbled out, blinking in the sudden openness. "We're leaving," Matthew said, his voice rough with disuse. "Now." Jack, a powerfully built man with a shock of red hair, fell into step beside Matthew. "Where to, boss?" "The spaceport. We're taking a ride off this rock." They moved through the darkened corridors of the compound. a ragtag band of humans stalking past the opulent trappings of their captors. Matthew led them unerringly, his memory of the compound's layout guiding their path. A pair of Ladosian guards rounded a corner and froze in shock at the sight of the escaped humans. Jack moved, a blur of speed and furious strength, and the guards crumpled to the floor. Matthew appropriated their stun batons and tossed one to Jack. "Arm up," he said to the group. "We're going to have to fight our way out." In a storage room off the main hall, they found a cache of Ladosian weapons, stun rifles, plasma pistols, even a few grenades. The humans armed themselves, dogged purpose etched on every face. "Jack, you're with me," Matthew said. "The rest of you, stay tight and do as we say. We're getting off this planet." Alarms blared as they neared the spaceport. The Ladosians had discovered their absence. Matthew cursed and broke into a run, the others close on his heels. They burst onto the landing pad to find ranks of Ladosian soldiers arrayed before them, weapons trained on the humans. "Open fire!" Matthew roared. Stun blasts and plasma bolts filled the air as the two sides clashed. The humans, armed with unfamiliar weapons and driven by sheer desperation, pushed forward. Matthew and Jack laid down covering fire, plasma hissing past them as they moved from cover to cover. Through the swirling smoke, Matthew glimpsed a familiar figure. Commander Zephyr stood at the rear of his troops, shouting orders. For a heartbeat, their eyes met across the battlefield. Matthew saw surprise in those alien eyes. Surprise and anger, and perhaps something else. Something like respect. "There!" Jack pointed to a sleek silver shuttle at the end of the pad. "That's our ride!" The humans clawed their way to the ship, blasters flaring. Matthew leaped into the pilot's chair, his hands flying over the unfamiliar controls. "Cover me!" he shouted as the others piled in. Plasma hammered the hull, alarms wailing. Then, with a bone-shaking roar, the engines ignited. The shuttle tore free of the docking clamps and hurtled into the sky, trailing smoke and sparks. On the pad below, Zephyr watched the shuttle dwindle to a bright point in the night. His face was unreadable in the flashing lights. He barked orders and soldiers scrambled to obey. In the shuttle, Matthew wrestling with the controls, the battered craft shuddering around him as it clawed for orbit. On the sensor screen, hostile contacts flashed as the Ladosian ships closed in. Tense minutes passed as Matthew juked and weaved, narrowly evading the stabbing beams of weapons fire. The shuttle was fast, but the Ladosian craft were faster. Just as the lead pursuer locked on, a blaze of light erupted before them. A swirling maelstrom of energy, a whirling tunnel ripped in the very fabric of space-time. A wormhole. Matthew didn't hesitate. With a yank of the controls, he sent the shuttle hurtling into the anomaly. The wormhole pulsed, swallowed the ship, and snapped shut, leaving the Ladosian vessels grasping at empty space. On the planet's surface, in the halls of Ladosian power, a grim realization descended. The humans were more than they appeared. They were dangerous, and now they were loose in the galaxy. And in the heart of the wormhole, Matthew and the other humans clung to their seats as space distorted around them, hurling them towards an unknown fate, towards a greater cosmic stage with players and powers beyond their imagining, towards a future where the fate of Earth and all humanity hung in the balance. The shuttle burst from the wormhole in a flash of light, its hull groaning from the stress. Matthew gripped the controls, his squeezing hard as he fought to stabilize their trajectory. Through the viewport, an impossible sight greeted them. A colossal ring structure hung in space, dwarfing their tiny craft. "Holy shit!" Jack breathed, pressing his face to the window. "What the hell is that thing?" Before Matthew could respond, the comms crackled to life. A deep, resonant voice filled the cabin. "Unidentified human vessel. This is the Galactic Concord. You are safe now. Please stand by for docking instructions." Matthew exchanged bewildered glances with his fellow escapees. After everything they'd been through, this seemed too good to be true. But what choice did they have? "This is Matthew Santos of Earth," he replied, his voice hoarse. "We copy. Standing by." As the voice guided them towards the massive station, it explained the situation. The Conquered had known about the Ladosians' crimes, but had been bound by non-interference protocols. Matthew's escape had changed everything. Their battered shuttle was enveloped by a tractor beam, guiding them into a cavernous docking bay. As the airlock cycled, Matthew took a deep breath. "Okay, people, let's not do anything stupid. We don't know these aliens or their motives. Stay alert." The hatch slid open with a hiss, revealing a delegation of diverse alien species. At their head stood a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin. It bowed slightly. "Welcome, brave humans. I am Ambassador Xylith. We have much to discuss." Hours later, Matthew's head spun as he tried to process everything he'd learned. The Concord's outrage at the Ladosians' actions, the offer of aid, the chance for payback. In a gleaming conference room, Matthew locked eyes with the assembled Concord leadership. "We'll do it, whatever it takes to stop the Ladosians and save Earth." What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Matthew and a hand-picked team were outfitted with combat suits that seemed to mold to their bodies. Tiny devices were implanted behind their ears, translation tech that would prove crucial to their mission. They trained relentlessly, honing their bodies and minds into weapons. Matthew watched with pride as his ragtag group of former captives transformed into a cohesive fighting unit. Finally, the day arrived. Concealed in shipping crates, they endured a nerve-wracking journey back to Ladosian space. Matthew's heart pounded as their transport touched down on the planet's surface. Under cover of darkness, they emerged. The familiar spires of Zephyr's estate loomed before them. Matthew's lip curled in a snarl as memories of his captivity flooded back. "Okay, team, you know the plan. Disable their systems, free our people, capture Zephyr. Let's move." They surged forward, Concord tech rendering them virtually invisible to Ladosian sensors. Matthew's mind raced as they approached the main security hub. This was it. No turning back now. With practiced precision, they breached the perimeter. Alarms blared, but too late. The humans moved like ghosts through the compound, their Concord weapons dropping Ladosian guards before they could even raise their own. Matthew led the charge to the holding cells, his rage building as he saw his fellow humans in cages. "We're getting you out of here," he growled, deactivating the force fields. As they fought their way deeper into the compound, Matthew caught sight of a familiar figure, Zephyr himself, frantically trying to flee. With a burst of speed, Matthew tackled the alien to the ground. Zephyr's eyes widened in shock as Matthew's translation implant kicked in. For the first time, he understood the Ladosians' panicked words. How is this possible? You're nothing but animals." Matthew's grin was feral as he hauled Zephyr to his feet. "Looks like this animal just took down the big bad alien," he snarled. "Now listen up, because I'm only going to say this once." As Matthew laid out the Concord's ultimatum, he savored the fear in Zephyr's eyes. The tables had turned. Humanity would no longer be prey. The battle was just getting started, but as Matthew stood victorious in the heart of his former prison, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never be the same. Matthew's finger tightened on the trigger as he stared down Zephyr. The Ladosian commander's eyes darted frantically between the human's resolute expression and the weapon trained on his head. "Order your forces to stand down," Matthew growled. "Now!" Zephyr's mandibles clicked in agitation before he barked commands into his communicator. Around them, Ladosian soldiers lowered their weapons and stepped back. Jack whooped, "We did it!" But their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared across the compound as news of their assault spread. Matthew grabbed Zephyr by the collar. "What's happening?" Before the alien could answer, the sky lit up. Massive ships appeared in low orbit, dwarfing even the largest Ladosian vessels. A booming voice echoed from unseen speakers. "Attention Ladosian forces. This is Admiral Krasnok of the Galactic Concord. Stand down immediately or face obliteration." Zephyr went limp in Matthew's grasp. "Impossible," he muttered. On screens throughout the city, panicked newscasters reported the Concord ultimatum. Matthew watched in awe as the Ladosian military crumbled. centuries of arrogance evaporated in minutes. In holding pens across the planet, confused humans felt their shackles fall away. Many lashed out at their former captors. Others huddled in fear, too broken to comprehend their newfound freedom. Matthew led his team through the streets. Ladosian civilians fled in terror at the sight of armed humans. Matthew tried to reassure them. "We're not here to hurt you," he called out. But the aliens' eyes were wide with primal fear as they scrambled to escape. Within hours, Matthew found himself in a Concord command center, surrounded by a dizzying array of alien species. Admiral Krasnok, a towering insectoid, loomed over him. "You've done well, Matthew Turner," the Admiral's translator crackled. "Your actions have opened the door for lasting change." Matthew nodded, still processing the rapid turn of events. "What happens now?" "Now," Krasnok's mandibles clicked, "we bring your people into the galactic community." On Earth, life continued as normal. Sally Jensen sipped her morning coffee, scrolling through social media on her phone. A news alert popped up. "Breaking. First contact with alien life confirmed." Sally's mug slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor. The notification continued. "In an unprecedented event, humanity has made first contact with an advanced alien civilization known as the Galactic Concord. Leading the diplomatic mission is Matthew Turner, hailed as a hero for his role in liberating human captives from an aggressive alien species." Sally stared at her phone in disbelief as the world around her erupted into chaos. Humanity's isolated existence was over. The stars were no longer out of reach. And at the center of it all stood Matthew Turner, former captive turned cosmic diplomat, ready to guide Earth into a new era of interstellar relations. The Concorde ships hung in Earth's orbit like gleaming sentinels, their massive forms dwarfing even the largest human spacecraft. Matthew Turner stood before a sea of cameras and microphones, his hands shaking slightly as he prepared to address humanity. "People of Earth," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves, "I come to you with a truth that will shake the foundations of our world." He recounted the horrors of Ladosian captivity, his voice cracking as he described the abuse and humiliation. The audience listened in stunned silence as Matthew revealed the existence of the Galactic Concord and their intervention. "We are not alone," he said, his eyes blazing with intensity, "and we are no longer helpless." In the days that followed, Matthew found himself shuttling between Earth and the Concord fleet, translating alien concepts into terms humans could understand. He watched in awe as Concord technology began to transform his home planet. Cities sprouted gleaming towers overnight. Hospitals buzzed with miraculous cures. The first human colony ships left for Mars, then Venus, then the moons of Jupiter. Yet as humanity reached for the stars, Matthew felt himself sinking. He attended endless ceremonies and shook countless hands, but the adulation felt hollow. At night, he woke in cold sweats, phantom chains around his wrists. One evening, as Matthew nursed a bottle of whiskey in his darkened apartment, a knock came at the door. He opened it to find Jack, his fellow escapee, standing there with concern etched on his face. "You look like shit, Matt," Jack said, pushing his way inside. Matthew slumped onto the couch. "I can't do this anymore, Jack. I see their faces every time I close my eyes. The Ladosians, the other humans in the cages." Jack sat beside him, his voice soft. "We need to go back. Face it head on." Days later, they stood on the surface of the Ladosian homeworld. The once proud aliens scurried about, now under the watchful eye of conquered peacekeepers. Matthew's breath caught in his throat as they approached Zephyr's compound. The former commander glared at them from behind a force field, his mandibles clicking furiously. "You animals," Zephyr spat. "You've destroyed everything." Matthew stared into those alien eyes, seeing not the terrifying captor of his nightmares, but a broken, bitter creature. He felt a weight lift from his chest. Without a word, he turned and walked away, leaving Zephyr to his impotent rage. They visited the prisons next. Matthew knelt in the empty cells, touching the cold metal bars. He closed his eyes, remembering the fear and despair that had once permeated these walls. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the ghosts of the past. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you all." Their final stop was Zephyr's estate. The habitat enclosure where Matthew had spent countless days in humiliating captivity stood empty, its transparent walls cracked and dirty. Matthew stepped inside, his heart pounding. He ran his hand along the wall where his leash had once been attached. Memories flooded back, the helplessness, the rage, the tiny spark of defiance that had kept him going. "I did it," he said softly. "I got out. I saved Earth." As the words left his lips, Matthew felt something shift inside him. The lingering chains of trauma began to loosen their grip. He turned to Jack, who waited outside the enclosure. "Let's go home," Matthew said, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. As they boarded the shuttle back to Earth, Matthew gazed out at the stars. For the first time in years, he felt truly free.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.